In five, four, three, two, one. Good evening, everybody. For to the viewers of Todd Talk Online, the officedesigner.com online. With me now is our guest lawyer from the prestigious Rajah and Tann of Singapore. He's also my good friend, Mr. Khelvin. Okay, we did one vlog about construction issues also about a few months ago. So now I invited him over live. Okay, I invited him live to discuss these very relevant issues about construction related problems amidst this COVID-19 pandemic, especially in Singapore. Because in Singapore, I mean, we are hit hard because our foreign workers, which comprise the bulk of our workforce in the construction industry, is not really will not be mobilized on time. A lot of them will still be in quarantine, or some are infected, or there will be a lot of safety measures that will be in place. So, it's really tough times, you see. That's why I chose specifically this topic. Okay, this topic for me is very close to my heart, being a designer, being a design and build owner. I know that this coming months will be very very tough for everyone. That's why, as a public service, for people, especially those in Singapore, to know about what they should be not expecting, but how Kelvin probably can help in addressing some of these issues that might prop up. Okay, so Kelvin, I'll give you the floor. So can you tell the viewers more about yourself, please?
Sure. Maybe what I'll do is let me just start the screen sharing
Sure.
so that I've got some slides so
Okay.
that everyone doesn't get sick and tired just looking at my face.
Yep.
Although I don't think they will get sick and tired of your face, so you don't have that problem.
No problem. Yeah. I give the floor to you. Yeah.
Okay, here we are. Okay, so
Okay.
first of all, I want to thank James for the opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to share with our viewers some of my thoughts about the issues that are going to be arising, especially after we come out of the circuit breaker period. I'm not a miracle worker, right? I cannot create magic solutions, but hopefully we can talk about some of the issues that we can identify and predict. And from there, we can try to work out solutions to these
Okay.
issues.
Yep.
So maybe a bit about myself first, so that you're wondering who is this person and why is he talking to you.
Yeah.
So my name is Khelvin. I know that Khelvin is spelled quite unusually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a partner with Rajah and Tann Singapore. I'm a lawyer, that's quite obvious. And primarily, I am a disputes lawyer, a litigation lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means in real terms is that I solve disputes for both companies and individuals. I
Okay.
handle litigation, I handle arbitration, mediation, even negotiations. And I
Okay.
also give a lot of advice on how to avoid disputes in the first place. And I
Great.
like to think of myself as a practical and commercial problem solver.
Perfect.
So if you'd like to find out more about me, well, if you Google my name, I guarantee you I'm the only Kelvin Shi with this spelling in Singapore, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
can find out more about me and what I write about if you do a quick Google.
Okay.
Okay,
Great.
so let me move on. I think that one of the first things that James was sharing with us about is what are the issues we think are going to arise once the circuit breaker has been eased.
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
I think most of us know that on 2nd of June, the circuit breaker measures are going to be eased up. But we also
Yes.
know that it is not back to normal. And I think we all know it is not business as usual. We are
Yes.
not going back to the old ways anytime soon. So I think there are three big things that I predict will be an issue for everyone. So first of all, there is going to be a whole set of new rules that will govern all workplaces, including construction sites. And the focus for today's talk is construction sites, of course. So what's happened is that last week on 15 May, BCA has circulated a media release in which they talk about the gradual resumption of construction work from 2nd June. And the stress is on the word gradual. It's
Yes.
not going to be 0 to 100 straight away. In fact, if you look at what BCA says that at the moment, we only have around 5% of
Yes.
the construction workforce, which is working on a very small number of critical projects. Okay.
Okay.
And from 2nd June, BCA will gradually allow more projects to continue. And what are the projects that are going to continue? These are the projects that cannot be left for too long because of safety concerns, or these are critical and time-sensitive projects. So
Okay.
one example that the BCA has cited would be MRT projects.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we only have 5% of the construction workforce, and BCA's estimate is that in June, you only have a further 5% of the construction workforce resuming work. So you only have a total of 10% in June.
Okay. Yep.
What do you think, James? I mean, does this gel with your experience right now in terms of what construction is allowed to go on and what is not?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, of course, everyone will should be thinking of safety first. Like especially like what I mentioned to you, most of the people in the workforce doing construction are the most vulnerable people to I mean, in terms of the COVID-19, like the foreign
Mm-mm-mm.
workers, So they will be the one that is most capable to spread the disease over to the community. So it is best really. I mean, it's for all. It's for everyone's good. Okay.
Mm.
So of course, I mean, I have no objection or I have no qualms with this policy. But what I can say is, if we can speed up a bit, because as contractors, as design and build people, we don't really have so much cash flow,
Mm.
and all
Yes.
and opportunity cost is all for if we're gonna start on 3 months from now, we, we will be losing quite a fair bit of money. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, in fact, to piggyback on that, I think the biggest concern for many of you in this industry is
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of your fixed costs will continue
Yes.
to accumulate. But
Mm-hmm.
if the project cannot go on, your cash flow is not coming in. And without the
Definitely.
revenue, how are you going to pay your expenses? So it's a real concern. We're going to touch on that later on.
Okay.
But I agree completely that this is a concern.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking about how, MRT projects, for example, are going to
Mm-hmm.
resume. The good news for those of us listeners who have home renovation works that have been
Definitely.
paused,
Yeah.
okay, the good news is
Uh,
that they are going to allow residential renovation works to continue. Okay, so I've got at least one friend who is waiting to get his.
when will that happen? I mean, is it considered an essential for now?
That's the
The
funny thing.
resident.
So what BCA said was that they are going to allow the so-called critical projects to resume, but on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, they are also going to allow residential renovation works to continue.
Yes.
I don't want to go into the issue of whether renovation works are considered critical. I'm sure if you are the one with the renovation done halfway, it is critical to you. But I
Yes.
am not going to go into on a national level whether it should
Yeah.
be considered critical. Okay, so that's one
Yes.
good piece of news. Okay, for those of
Mm-hmm.
us who are waiting for our residential renovation work to start, or has it
Okay.
interrupted? There's another piece of good news for the
Mm-hmm.
listeners who are waiting for their BTO flats to be completed. So
Mm-hmm.
what BCA has said is that the BTO flats are also on the priority list for restart.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so hopefully there won't be any delay in our viewers who are waiting for the BTO flats
I
in
have a
eventually
question.
collecting. Yes.
I have a question, Kelvin.
Mm.
Yeah, considering BCA allows home renovation to start, who will work on it? Most of the workers are either from Malaysia,
Mm.
and the others are the foreign workers.
Correct.
Okay, so even though they allow it to start, if there's no one, I mean, I think most of the carpentry are also done in Singapore.
Mm.
There are some that has a local workforce, but based on my experience for renovation and commercial interior design, most of subcons and most of the workers are really from Malaysia, and
Mm.
a lot of them, especially for the builders works, painting works and stuff like that. The wet works are mostly from the foreign workers. So
Yes,
this is another issue. I mean, yeah,
mm.
okay, agree. They can start work, but at
Mm.
the end of the day, who's gonna work? That's another
Correct.
question.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a big problem. Okay, let me be very direct about this. Okay, I think I'll expand on this further on, but
Mm-hmm.
you are completely correct. Just because BCA gives a green light
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have the workers or even the materials to begin
Correct.
work. All right.
Yes.
So let's talk on that further. Okay, it's
Sure. Yep.
indeed an issue that has been identified.
Yeah.
So I was talking about how so BCA is only going to allow essential work, okay,
Mm-hmm.
to continue. And so what will happen is that in order for works to continue, you will need approval from BCA.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can assume that BCA is not going to give his approval any how.
Mm-hmm.
So you will probably need to have some measures put in place by employers before BCA will allow the work to resume. Now,
Yes.
BCA hasn't released publicly the
Okay.
precise criteria yet, but
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the media releases, the press releases, I
Mm-hmm.
think we can get a pretty good sense of some of the things that BCA is going to want to do. Okay,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so there are a few things. So first of all, testing. Okay, BCA will want all migrant workers to be tested before they're allowed to return to work. If the worker
Yes.
hasn't been tested, I think you can assume that BCA is not going to allow that worker back to work. That's one.
Okay.
Okay, but there's no point having a healthy worker go to work and then the worker gets reinfected.
Yes.
So I think we can expect that employers will need to have a system in place to track their workers' daily health status. And they will also need to manage their interaction on
Mm-hmm.
their rest days. So they will need to test their workers for COVID-19 regularly.
Okay.
Now, again, we don't have the precise criteria for
Mm-hmm.
construction yet. But if you look at the safe management measures that MOM has announced for workplaces in general, okay,
Okay.
for the employees who are going into the office, they will now need to take their temperature twice daily.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of us, you remember, this is exactly what happened during SARS. Everyone would have to take their temperature and report their
Definitely.
temperature.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we'll probably need to also declare that we've got no symptoms, we've had no contact with COVID-19 cases, we're not
Mm-hmm.
under any quarantine order or stay at home notice. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that for many workplaces and employers, they probably already have implemented this on a weekly basis at least.
Yes. Yeah.
So maybe not the temperature checking, although I know some companies already do that. Okay, but I believe that the same and maybe even more is going to apply to foreign workers and construction workers. Okay, so that's
Yes.
another thing. Okay, next thing. We know, of course, that safe entry have been rolled out at all workplaces. Okay, so from now on, not just your shopping malls and your other places which are open, workplaces are supposed to implement safe entry. So I
Okay.
think we can assume that safe entry will be implemented at all work
Mm-hmm.
sites also. Okay,
Yeah.
and it's not just a matter of blindly checking in and out using safe entry. I think
Mm-hmm.
we can expect that we will need to implement safe management measures at the work sites. So what do
Mm-hmm.
I mean by safe management measures? It will be things like, for example, having your workers segregated according to work zones. Okay,
Okay.
having staggered breaks, for example. Not
Mm-hmm.
everyone should be having lunch at the same time. You should be staggering your breaks. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
even staggering your start and stop time for work. Again,
Yes.
this is already happening for all workplaces. And given the vulnerabilities of the construction sector, I think we can expect that the same measures, if not even more stringent measures, would also be implemented at work sites.
Yeah.
On top of that, okay, the one other dimension to construction workers is that unlike many other industries, the accommodation quite often is also provided by the employer.
Correct.
So for the employers, unfortunately, they will have this additional burden. I think we can assume that for the workers' accommodation, they will probably need to split it up by project. So all
Yes.
the workers working on one project will stay in this location.
Correct.
All the workers for another project will be in another location. And
Yes.
I suspect that employers would also be expected to provide dedicated transport between the work sites and the place of accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
again, to be very direct, the BCA and the MOM is likely to want employers to take on this additional responsibility on
Yes.
making sure that workers don't go all over the island. I mean, I'm not saying whether it's right or fair, but I
Mm-hmm.
think that is part of a strategy they've already implemented, and they are likely to want to continue the strategy.
Yeah. The way I see it, Kelvin, I mean, all of this is good in theory.
Mm,
Okay. I'm a person on the ground, so I know how things happen on site. You see, so all of these things is nice to have. The problem will always be implementation. It's
yeah.
because most of the foreign workers, I mean, it's not really like us, educated to follow exact rules and stuff like that. In our line of work, okay, if you notice, if you go to a site, especially for commercial design or even residential, how many people you see wearing PPE even before the COVID-19? As in wearing their safety vests, their hard hats, their gloves,
Mm,
holding the ladders based on the workplace safety and health guidelines. So even before, we already have safety officers on site, but
yes.
the problem will always be implementation. So
Yes.
my question here is, sometimes for us, like, design and build people, we are technically the main con. Okay, we have subcons, and then if they violate their this laws or this policies by the government, especially the
Mm,
foreign workers, which we
mm-hmm,
don't really have any control with,
mm,
because on site we cannot be there just looking at them most
mm,
of the time, 24, I mean, during the working time. If they don't comply, and then of course we as the main con will also be affected. We have a main con, we have a subcon, and then the subcons people are not complying. So any implications on this? Are we not
mm.
safe because not all people are really following these
I
guidelines?
mean, it could be a communication issue as well. I mean, for many of the
Yeah.
workers, English is not their first language,
Mm-hmm.
and they may be used to doing things in a certain way. I mean, I don't have a magic solution because, like I shared at the very beginning, we don't have the precise criteria yet. I
Yes.
think these are some. I think it's safe to assume that this is the direction that the government and BCA will go. But
Mm-hmm.
as to the precise rules that are implemented and how they expect these rules to be followed, I think
Yes.
we'll have to wait and see. That being said, okay, I hear you on the difficulty of implementing, and I
Yeah.
think because of that, you are not going to like what I wanted to share next.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to share next was that I think we can also expect that there will be requirements for workers to have enhanced personal hygiene. So
Definitely.
this will mean
Wow.
things like individually packed meals. This will
Mm-hmm.
mean things like having to ensure that workers wear PPE. This will
Yes.
even mean things like discouraging the sharing of tools. So
Correct.
that's going to be tough. Okay. The authorities will probably also want the shared facilities to be disinfected more often.
Mm.
They will need more ventilated rest areas, which I mean, to be fair, they should have a proper place to rest. So I am perfectly fine with
Yeah.
that. Okay.
No, it's
The
really very difficult. Let's just step on the personal hygiene. I mean, I'll just give a few of my experience here. Like for when we do offices, fit outs of offices, you know, uh, sometimes we are not allowed to use the common toilets.
uh,
There are
mm,
certain times. So
mm,
by now, I think 100% sure, we will not our workers will not be allowed to use the public toilets by the building management, right? So now where will these people wash their hands? Where will these people do their stuff? You see? So this one will be another problem, the way I see it. There's a lot of small problems that will pop out. You see?
I think, unfortunately, the other thing I was going to share was I can almost guarantee you that another requirement that BCA will put in is that
Mm-hmm.
there are enough hand washing stations, right?
Yes.
Because we know how important hand hygiene is to combat the spread of COVID-19. So
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen? Again, off the top of my head, either there'll be more costs
A lot,
because
a lot of
contractors would
cost.
have to set up their own dedicated
Mm.
temporary hand washing facilities if they
Yes.
cannot use the facilities that are already on site.
Yes.
And I think the problem is this. In the long run, it may well be that the market would correct itself, that you have to build the need to implement all these measures into your pricing when you tender or bid for projects. But in the
Yeah.
short run, for the projects for which you already have a tender, you
Mm-hmm.
already have a fixed price for delivery, but yet you have to implement all these new measures, I think that is going to contribute even more to the
Yes.
short-term pain that the contractors and the subcontractors are going to feel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's why I call it the perfect storm. You
yeah,
know, the construction industry is now experiencing the perfect storm.
correct. And then, we're talking about these difficulties with making sure that the rules are implemented. So,
Mm-hmm.
the typical BCA approach, which is when you have new rules that need to be complied, you also need to appoint someone to make sure
Yes.
that the rules are implemented. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, okay, employers will almost certainly need to appoint safe management officers to implement all these safety rules. Okay, they are going to be the ones who would have to educate and inform employees about all the safe distancing measures.
Yep.
Okay, they are the ones who would have to come up with educational plans, for example, using posters, infographics, in the native languages of the workers.
Mm-hmm.
So, to put it in very layman Singaporean terms, you will need to arrow someone to do this. Okay, and that person would be on the chopping block, right? If there's
Yes.
anything that goes wrong. And the reason why there is the risk of this person being on the chopping block is because BCA has also stated that they are going to have an audit and inspection regime.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a problem, right? Because you can't just go through the motions. You have to expect that BCA is going to come out to do inspections.
Definitely.
And much as I know that the margins are already very thin in this industry, I know that it's not easy from a compliance point of view, but I guarantee you, BCA is going to make an example of the first few offenders that they catch.
Yeah.
They are going to publicize it widely. I don't think we can assume that whatever punishment is meted out is just going to be a slap on the wrist. Because I
Okay.
think BCA and the multi-ministries all coordinating this effort, they are deadly serious
Yes.
about making sure that people follow the rules. And
Okay.
the reason why I'm so confident about this is because even if you look at all the people who go out without a mask, who flout all the circuit breaker measures,
Mm-hmm.
they are being prosecuted quite vigorously. And you
Yes.
see all these cases in the media all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to assume that they are going to be quite serious about enforcement as well.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see, this actually brings us precisely to our second problem, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
with all these new rules, right? Especially if they are not going to allow cross deployment, okay,
Mm-hmm.
across different projects, then I think only a very small number of projects will be allowed to restart. Because you talk
Yes.
about cross deployment in particular, it's so prevalent in the industry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this really brings me to my second point, which we had touched on a little bit earlier, which is, like it or not, there is going to be a serious manpower and materials crunch. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, first of all, in the short to medium time, it's going to be much more difficult to bring foreign workers to Singapore. If
Definitely.
you look at what MOM is doing, okay, MOM has already stated that it will only allow work pass workers in essential services like healthcare and transport to enter Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
So if you check the list of essential services, okay, it only includes some construction works, like for
Mm-hmm.
example, construction for critical public infrastructure or
Mm-hmm.
works that must be carried out for safety purposes. But
Yes.
this is precisely the work that is already allowed now anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
it really doesn't expand the scope of
Yeah.
what you're allowed to bring in your workers for, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have a manpower crunch. And even for your workers who are presently in Singapore, you hit the nail on the head earlier. You may have folks who are still serving out their quarantine orders. You may have folks who are ill. You would have folks who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 and thankfully they're asymptomatic, they are generally fine, but we still
Mm-hmm.
need to wait for them to recover before
Yes.
they can rejoin the workforce. And I am not sure how many of these workers are even going to be available to start work from 2nd June onwards. So
Yeah,
that's
I
the
agree.
manpower front. I mean, what do you
Mm-hmm.
think, James? I mean, what other problems are we facing with manpower?
I think manpower will really be a very, very big issue because the way I see it, most of the foreign workers also have some trauma. Okay, they're also human. They're not. I mean,
Yes,
besides they need money, they will also be uh, uh, they will also experience trauma. You know about what
yes,
happened to them in Singapore, about all of these things that's happening. You know, they will instill fear. So first things first. Once I think they open, some of them will not even continue their contracts already, and then they will decide to just totally forgo their contracts, go back to their
mm,
home countries and stuff like that.
yep,
Especially when all of those measures are in place. Imagine you cannot talk on site, you
mm,
cannot mingle on site, you cannot
mm,
do this, you cannot do. There's a lot of things that you cannot do on site. I think
correct.
all of these people will go crazy. You see,
Mm,
because as humans, we need to interact. We need to talk to people. Like for example, on our break time, that's the only time that we can, after sweating out for work, doing the heavy lifting.
yep,
This is the time where you can start talking to your colleagues, or maybe your dorm mates or other people, and then you
correct,
will be deprived of this. For me, this is
correct,
hell. I'd
correct.
rather not work here. And then for how much,
Mm.
right?
Correct. And this is just going to exacerbate the problem because
Correct.
if we already cannot bring in workers and you have
Mm.
existing workers who are either unwell or who want to go
Yeah.
back to their home country, and who can blame them? That is a very human instinct.
Yeah.
I think it is only going to exacerbate the manpower crunch. Now, on top of the manpower crunch, I think we are also going to see a material crunch. I mean,
Hmm.
you will know this better than me, but I
Yeah.
think in particular, when you talk about the Malaysian and the Chinese lockdown, that would have severely affected the
Supply
inflow of
chains.
construction methods.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. I mean, what problems are you facing on this front?
Currently, we still don't know because I mean, all happened before the circuit breaker. That's
Mm,
why once the circuit breaker opens, or on June 2 or next month onwards, this is where we will see bigger cracks. This is
yes.
where we will see everything, the
Mm,
supply, the problems with supplies, supply chain and stuff like that. This is where that's why a lot of people are not excited really to go to work.
yep.
They're more scared on what they will see, because
Mm,
I've heard from also from some of other people or friends. They might also be retrenchments along the ways, because this is
correct.
people cannot fire employees through Zoom, or through WhatsApp or through email. And now,
Um, Arguable. Maybe not so much from a human
yeah,
interaction point of view, but from a legal point of view. Okay,
no,
we can talk
because
about this offline.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you see, the way I see it, I mean, now people are still work from home, so they don't really see the effects. You
Yes.
see, like whether our business will still be viable to continue in the long term. So
Correct.
once everything will be back to normal, people can do a gauge on how
Yes.
can can do a proper forecasting of their business, whether I can still continue another three
Correct.
more months with negative
Correct.
balance,
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
So
I think the reality is that right now for a lot of people, we are in purgatory, right?
yes,
We
correct.
don't know what's going to happen when we're out of purgatory. It could be better, it could be worse, but I think a lot of people are assuming that it could be worse, a lot worse.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
this really brings me to my next point. The
Mm-hmm.
third point actually on one of the on the issues that we can expect when the
Mm-hmm.
circuit breaker is lifted. We've got this double whammy of the increased regulation
Okay.
and the shortage of workers and materials, which
Mm-hmm.
is why the third point is we will need to manage our clients' expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I think some clients may have the impression that once the circuit breaker is lifted, everything is going to proceed full steam ahead.
No.
But as we've already
Yeah,
discussed above, it's not possible. Okay,
it's
this
not
is
possible.
just simply not possible. So you may have clients who start to talk about things like liquidated damages, clauses on how time is of the essence. So this is where the education element comes in. I think we all need to play a part in spending some time with your disgruntled clients to explain the situation and
Mm-hmm.
why everyone's hands are tied. And I'll talk a little bit more about these contractual clauses and these contractual issues later on.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but I think these are my top three issues that I can predict moving out of the circuit breaker period.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Okay. So for I mean I still have some questions on especially on all of this new what do you call this new policies and stuff. There will
mm,
definitely be price adjustments, or
mm,
there will be higher price. The way I see it, you know, based on my off the top calculation, it will be another 30 to 40%, just to be honest.
wow.
It's not really because we did, for me personally, I did some projects with that is high security, like data centers and stuff like that. Okay. So this one requires people to really be very strict, the timing, everything, you know. So we usually put a premium for this type of projects, like
Mm,
increase another 10-20% in order
understand.
for us to cover, because even our subcons, they usually ask for more. That means, you know, in order for them to really fulfill all the full PPE, they're not gonna remove their helmets and stuff like that. They will
Yep,
be fully clothed and stuff at the heat of the sun, you know,
yep,
installing aircon outside, you see. They're demanding at least another 15 to 20% also. So
understand.
we have to pass it over
Mm,
to the clients. So
mm,
now with this in place, I can, that's why I can say it's roughly around 30 to 40% increase. You see, this is really my honest to goodness feel. It's because, like what you say, there will be less manpower. So
mm,
it's like it's just a simple of law of supply and demand, right?
yes.
Now we have no supply, but we will have a lot of demand. So now, previously, based on my calculation, a foreign worker plus the dorm plus the levy plus the pay is about 2,500 also, or something within that range.
Mm,
So now I think most of the foreign workers will be demanding higher,
mm,
right? They will be demanding higher. What I can see is probably might be, you know, people might just be foreign workers just might be cutting their contracts and stuff, go back for a while, hibernate, and then go back with a better demand. You see, I
mm,
mean, all of this is just off the top.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, let's talk about that. Okay.
Mm.
Let's talk about the difficulty with. Okay, let's. I mean, there's a lot that we just talked about. Let's unpack some of that. Okay, let's talk first
Mm.
about your expectation that the cost of doing business is going to increase by 30 to 40%.
Yeah.
Okay, and I know in this industry, a lot of times the margins are very thin,
Very thin.
and it may well be that you find that you end up making a loss if you were
Mm.
to complete the project.
Yeah.
So I suppose the next question that people ask is whether they can then tell the client, okay, because of all this, I am going to increase the contract price. You have to pay me more.
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
what I mean, Calvin, is after the COVID, like for example, before the COVID,
Mm,
before the circuit breaker, I quote you, like let's say 50,000.
mm,
But after the COVID, things will change. Can I
yep.
adjust the cost by maybe about another? Can I add another 25,000 just
Okay.
because of these new
So
policies?
let's talk about projects that you
Mm,
already agreed to before COVID. You know, you
correct.
signed the dotted line, you have a
Yeah.
contract price, you know, you've already tendered at a certain price, and
Yeah.
then you've got to continue work after COVID.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
And I suppose the question is whether as a contractor, you can demand
Yeah.
that there is a
Not really
price
demand.
adjustment.
Maybe is there any? I cannot say request. Is there any? way where we can probably talk to our clients maybe in a way that they will probably just
Uh,
agree on this? Any
you know,
policy or
James,
something?
um, for this, you probably can't talk to a lawyer. You probably need to talk to,
Your
I don't
client?
know, someone
Yeah.
who, uh, someone who can grant wishes, maybe. I mean, okay,
No,
I
no,
mean,
because this one is
mm,
the reality on the
yeah,
ground. You see, I mean, a lot of I know a lot of friends also in the industry that they
mm,
started work before pre-CB, and
mm,
all of those fit out costs were negotiated way back before Chinese New Year, or they were able to close in December,
yep,
which there is no COVID, no whatsoever, and
yep,
then they are scheduled to start in after Chinese New Year. So after
yep,
Chinese New Year, okay, fulfilled, start. So now start, and then they are only about 10, 15, 20% on site. Circuit breaker come,
yep.
stop, right?
Okay, so let's approach this from a legal angle, okay, because
Okay.
that is my area of expertise, okay.
Yes.
So the first thing is we always have to go back to the contract. Does the
Mm-hmm.
contract provide for any kind of situation where if certain things happen, then you are allowed to change the requirements under the contract as
Yes.
to what needs to be provided.
Yeah.
Okay, so um, okay, let me give maybe instead of talking about increasing the contract price, okay, I
Yes.
will approach the problem from another angle, which is we've talked about how you are going to have difficulty in terms of manpower and materials in starting the project, and
Mm-hmm.
then you may not be able to finish on time, right?
Yes.
This is, and then
Mm.
everyone in the industry knows that, you know, when you don't finish on time, you need to try and get an
Liquidated
extension of
damages.
time, and
Yeah.
if you can't get extension of time, then you are talking about liquidated damages, right? So
Mm.
let's talk about liquidated damages in the context of the circuit breaker and COVID-19.
Mm.
Okay, now I think most of us, most of our viewers who are in the industry would know that liquidated damages clause specifies that if you can't finish work by a particular completion date, then unless you get an extension of time, for every day that the construction work overruns, the
Mm-hmm.
contractor will have to pay a fixed sum of money to the client. Okay,
Correct.
generally this is
Mm.
how the liquidated damages or LD clauses for short operate.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but most construction contracts would also provide for some events which will entitle the contractor to extensions on time. In other words, if these things happen, you should be able to get an extension on time. Okay,
Yes.
and quite often the events which allow you to get an extension on time would include what we call force majeure events. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
force majeure is a Latin term for what we call extraordinary events that are
Mm.
beyond the control of the parties. And when you talk about such extraordinary events, you talk about things like wars, riots, or pandemics.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm supposed to deliver something to a planet which is blown up by the Death Star, that's probably a force majeure event, all right?
Yes. Yes. Even
Okay.
disasters are force majeure, right?
Yes, they
Earthquakes.
can be.
Yeah. And
It depends
typhoons,
on,
hurricanes. Yeah.
correct. So it depends on the contract itself and how it
Mm-hmm.
defines force majeure events. But generally, these are the things that people think about when they talk about force majeure events. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have a construction contract that specifies that one
Mm-hmm.
of the force majeure events is an epidemic, then
Mm-hmm.
this may apply to the current situation. Because,
Yes.
and okay, on top of that, even if your contract doesn't specify epidemic, okay, but it specifies natural disaster.
Mm-hmm.
COVID-19 might also be considered a natural disaster. It might be, okay,
Mm.
but it is something that will need to be decided by the courts or arbitration if it goes that far. Okay.
Okay.
Sometimes your contract also refers to acts of government as a force majeure event. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the entire set of circuit breaker measures is an act of government. It's something
Okay.
implemented by the government. So
Mm-hmm.
this may well be something that the contractor can rely on to say, look, there is a force majeure event, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore I require an extension of time. Okay.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting when we talk about force majeure is if you look to China, Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this trade body called the China Council for the Promotion of International Trade. So
Okay.
what they did was that they announced that they would offer force majeure certificates to Chinese companies that could not fulfill their contracts with foreign
Correct.
parties
Mm.
because of COVID-19. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
what they are saying is, well, let me help you out. I will declare that this is a force majeure event. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
as to whether or not this is sufficient grounds for force majeure to apply, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
enough for a body like this to declare. Okay, I'm not going to go there for now. That is a far more technical legal question. It's also
Okay.
a question of Chinese law, but we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing that happening. Okay, if you look back to Singapore, okay,
Mm-hmm.
what's quite interesting is that in February 2020, okay,
Okay.
what BCA did was that BCA actually informed contractors that
Mm-hmm.
for those contractors which are involved in public sector projects, if
Okay.
they assess that their work progress has been delayed due to COVID-19, even
Mm-hmm.
after they have already taken mitigating measures, they can submit EOT or extension of time claims under the contract provisions. So it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like BCA is dropping a hint to the contractors, okay, I cannot unilaterally or automatically give you an extension of time, but if you think you need extension of time, please apply for an extension of time. It's almost
Okay.
like they're hinting to the contractors that they should help themselves. Okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But okay, I should also sound a note of caution
Mm-hmm.
because force majeure clauses, they normally only apply if the event like COVID-19
Mm.
disrupts, obstructs, or prevents the fulfillment of contractual obligations.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, if COVID-19 has caused inconvenience or
Okay.
it has increased the costs that contractors must pay to fulfill their construction contracts, this may not be considered a force majeure event.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I think, is the problem that we were talking about earlier, which is maybe, the problem with COVID-19 is that um, you can still complete the project, but you've got to incur so much more cost. Okay.
Yes.
From this perspective, a force majeure clause may not save you because from the client's point of view and from a Singapore contract law point of view, the
Mm-hmm.
starting point is you enter into this bargain. It was a bad bargain, but too bad the court is not going to come in to rewrite your contract to make it a fairer contract. Unfortunately, that's not how Singapore law works when it comes to
Yes.
contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really a problem, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, I suppose if you have this situation, then the question then is how you can come to some kind of resolution
Mm.
with the client, because this was
Yeah.
the precise question you asked me at the very
Mm.
beginning of all this. So, I'm a litigation lawyer, which means I go to court for a living. But
Mm-hmm.
that being said, there's a very common saying, which is a bad settlement is better than a good lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what this means is, even though I go to court regularly, my starting point is always to encourage the stakeholders to sit down, talk through the issues, and try to find a win-win solution.
Yes.
Because let me be very direct and practical.
Mm-hmm.
If the problem is that the parties simply don't have the money, suing someone is not going to make money magically appear in that party's pocket for you to take. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work that way, right? I mean, one of the things we always talk about in litigation is if you want to sue someone, you don't want to just get a paper judgment. You want
Yes.
to make sure that the opposing party actually has assets that you can enforce the judgment against.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the point of going to court and getting a court judgment, and at the end of the day, there's nothing for you to enforce against? You would have spent all the time and money and gotten essentially a piece of paper. And even as a lawyer who focuses on results, I hate to see that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, okay, even though I say that I encourage trying to work out a win-win solution, I would still suggest getting advice from a lawyer sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And I mean, I hope I don't sound selfish, when I say this, but I've seen many, many cases where a party has a dispute and the party doesn't seek legal advice until much, much later, maybe
Okay.
because the party is worried about the cost, maybe
Mm-hmm.
because it's worried about souring the relationship. But by then, because the party hasn't been legally advised, so the company may have taken some steps or made some statements that end up weakening their legal position. So
Yes.
that's not
Agree.
something you want also, right? I mean, you want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about it, but you don't want to end up undermining your position also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my suggestion is always contact a lawyer sooner rather than later. Okay, I mean,
Okay.
you don't have to commence litigation immediately, but at least get some advice on your rights, your obligations, your remedies, what can be done, so that you don't end up hurting yourself.
Okay. So let's go to the worst case scenario.
Mm,
Okay. Contractor cannot fulfill already because imagine that's about if 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 the works will start around September, that's about 6 months of no
mm,
income. And
yes.
then like what I mentioned to you, not all contractors have really very long
Mm,
have really long money, to roll. That means their
yes.
cash flow is also very tight. Others are even living end to end.
Yep.
So how will it affect everything? I mean, they cannot fulfill already. Sorry, you know, it starts, but I already have no money. I already paid all my people. They already, you know. So I mean, I know
Mm,
it's a very vague question, but
yeah.
I think some of our viewers are watching because they might be somewhere near within
Mm,
this threshold. So
mm,
maybe we definitely we're, we're not really looking for a specific answer, but at
mm.
least tips.
Sure.
Like yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's a real problem, James. Okay,
Right.
and I am not going to sugarcoat it. Okay, we are
Mm,
already seeing businesses fall at a rate not seen for many, many years, and it is only going to accelerate.
correct.
When the job support scheme comes to an end, when the foreign worker levy rebates come to an end,
Mm,
when the moratoriums come to an end, I'm sorry to say that I think we are going to see more businesses going bust. I
mm,
hate to say it. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's someone's dream, someone's life going up in flames,
mm-hmm.
but it's going to happen.
Yeah. Because
And yeah,
it's
sorry,
both
go on.
ways. I mean, if you don't fulfill it, the subcons will not get paid.
Yep.
Okay, the client will not get
Mm,
what they want. So
mm,
it's really a very messy situation, right?
correct. Correct. I mean, it's a cascading effect. I recognize that completely.
Mm,
Um, okay, so there are a few things that can happen in this situation, and I'm not saying
okay.
that any of these are perfect or great, but this is what happens. Okay, so let's say you are the boss of an SME, okay,
Mm-hmm,
and you look at the assets of a company versus the liabilities of a company, and you decide there's really no point in continuing. Okay,
mm-hmm,
so what you can do, I suppose, is to apply to wind up the company. So the way this process works is that a liquidator will be appointed. The liquidator will take over the assets of the company, and
mm-hmm,
assets also includes unpaid invoices. So if, for
mm-hmm,
example, the company still has invoices due and owing to it, the
mm-hmm.
liquidator can go after these debtors and try to get them to pay at least something for these invoices. Okay.
Okay.
So after the liquidators have put in all the assets, they will use the money or whatever assets they have to pay off the creditors of the company.
Mm-hmm,
So this may even include, for example, clients with outstanding projects. Okay, but it really depends on the contract terms. Okay,
mm-hmm.
and after the creditors are paid, if there's anything left over, chances are there won't be. But if there's anything left over, then it goes back to the shareholders of the company. But
Yes.
chances are, even for the creditors, they
Mm,
are very likely only going to get pennies on the dollar. But you see, this also presents an opportunity
mm-hmm,
because from a creditor's point of view, okay,
mm-hmm,
um, if they hear that if the construction company comes to them, the contractor goes to them hand on heart and says, look, I'm sorry, but I need some help, otherwise I'm going to wind up. And if I wind up, you are only going to get pennies on the dollar, or you are going to have a project that's left there half done. So I really
Yeah.
need you to help out. Okay, look, I'm not suggesting that there is any obligation on the part of the client to help out. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, for all we know, the clients themselves may have difficulty helping out, even if they wanted to help out. I mean,
Yes.
if for
Agree.
example,
Mm-hmm.
your client is in F&B, good luck to you, because
Uh,
F&B is really, really, really hard right now, right?
yeah.
And I think if you look at the news when they announced that on 2nd June onwards, dine-in is still not going to be allowed, I think there'll be many F&B owners who would have reacted with utter dismay upon
Mm-hmm.
hearing this news. I think many of them would have been just trying to survive this period and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully they can start operating again. But unfortunately, those hopes have been dashed with the latest
Mm-hmm.
announcements. So I
Yeah.
think the point I really want to make is this isn't a legal solution, but from a commercial perspective, I think now is the time where all of us will have to sit down and think about whether we are prepared to share some pain in the
Yes.
hope that the overall pain that everyone feels is going
Mm-hmm.
to be more spread out. Because as you said, there is going to be a cascading effect as well if
Mm-hmm.
people go down,
Yeah.
right? So hopefully that's one possibility, to really sit down, have an honest conversation. And I think if you sit down with your customers, with your clients, with your contractors, and you tell them, look, I'm having problems because of COVID-19, I think
Mm-hmm.
immediately everyone knows what you're talking about, and no one is going to assume that you're trying to pull a fast one.
Definitely.
Maybe, yeah,
Definitely.
in good times, you may have all kinds of reasons, but
Mm-hmm.
this is something that everyone knows is happening and
Yeah.
everyone is facing. Okay,
Everyone is affected. Yeah.
correct. Okay, there's one more thing though, which I haven't mentioned. So you know that as part of the support package announced by the government, okay, they
Mm-hmm.
have also been working with the local banks to
Mm-hmm.
make available certain loan schemes to assist
Yeah.
SMEs. Okay, so that's something that SMEs can look into with the local banks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that it's a perfect solution, okay,
Mm-hmm.
because first of all, there will still be terms and conditions for all these loans.
Correct.
Second, loans will need to be repaid eventually. So I
Yes.
think this is really unfortunately the survival of the fittest. If even before COVID-19, you are running a F&B business, for example, that is some years are good, some years are not so good, very thin margins,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you're barely surviving. Um, the question is whether you have a plan to reverse this,
Mm-hmm.
especially with COVID-19 continuing to ravage our economy, and whether a loan is necessarily going to help you in the long run, whether
Yeah.
you have a proper plan for repaying the loan. Because don't
Yes.
forget, even if it is low interest rate, there's still interest to be paid.
Yes.
So I
Uh-huh.
think, these are really the times where, as a business, you have to sit down and ask yourself the hard questions,
Correct.
whether it is worth it to continue, whether you actually have a plan if you take on a loan, or
Okay.
whether you are just delaying the inevitable.
Because the way I see it, I mean, I'm now talking as a business owner.
Mm,
If I don't like, for example, for Arid, if we wanted to move forward,
mm,
the problem is you'll never know when it's already an end. I mean, this COVID-19 may have a second wave
yes,
come winter time in the northern hemisphere, like the US and stuff, or probably even in Singapore, we might really have a second wave. We'll never know. So
mm,
there's a lot of uncertainty
correct.
involved in your decision making process. So a loan doesn't guarantee me. I'm fine with the loan if, like, for example, we're finished, right? Like, okay, after June 1st, we will gradually ease, and we're 100% sure that
Mm,
this COVID-19 will not be back by December, or anything soon. There no longer
mm,
be a second wave.
right.
All the countries in the world will start their recovery phase.
Mm,
Then I will make a decision. Okay, I mean, I'll still take risk. I'll
mm,
still continue. I'll still carry on with the businesses because I see a light at the end of a tunnel. You see,
right.
but this one is not the light in the end of the tunnel. It's not merely not even a small light. Is because we open in June 2. We'll never know what will happen. Government also say things become worse. We go back to the circuit breaker and stuff. And then the whole world is telling us that, okay, be careful about the second wave. It's inevitable and stuff like that.
Correct.
So all of these things are all going into your head.
Mm,
How can you make a proper judgment decision to get a loan? Is because maybe you get a loan, you only pay now, you get the loan. I mean, the best way is you get the loan, you bring it into the business to make the business grow, right?
mm,
But if you get a loan to repay all of those back end debts that you incurred in a few months or even moving forward, then that's not the way, right?
correct. Agree completely. And I think for many of us, who
Mm,
had greeted the news of the lifting of the circuit breaker measures on 2nd June with dismay,
mm-hmm.
because it doesn't go as far as we would like. I think this is only going to be a precursor of
Correct.
things to come. I
Mm,
think whatever our most optimistic projection, I think
mm,
we have to assume that the real situation is not going to be as good as our projections. I
mm.
mean, for all we know, a miracle could happen tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah,
Tomorrow we wake up and it's gone. But if you are going to bet your business on such a miracle happening,
yeah.
I'm not sure I can agree with this kind of
Correct.
decision making. That's the way I see it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then yesterday only, right? The World Health Organization mentioned that yesterday was the highest
Mm,
infection in a day. So that means we're not even on the downward
no,
trend.
no, no.
We're still going up. We're not yet there. And
We are not out of the woods.
knowing Singapore, we're relying also from outside. We're not really a self-sustaining country, right?
Correct.
So whatever happens outside will definitely affect Singapore. If we
Agreed.
have natural resources, we can lock down our borders and live by our own. But that cannot happen in Singapore,
Correct.
right?
Correct. I mean, it's just a really tough situation to be in. And I go back
Mm,
to, what I shared at the beginning, which is money doesn't just magically appear out of nowhere to solve the problem,
yeah,
right? So I think as stakeholders, we just have to find a way to pull together and have an open and honest conversation about
yeah.
how to find mutual solutions. I'll give you an example, okay? Uh, Everyone can also consider some innovative situations or innovative solutions.
Mm-hmm,
I'll give you an example, okay? So I know about this particular condominium, okay? Um, so for most condominiums, you have a few apartment blocks, and then you have a
mm-hmm,
swimming pool, okay? And then you have okay. So for this condominium, next to the swimming pool, you have a low-lying block containing just 2 units, and it's right
mm-hmm.
next to the swimming pool. It's not connected to any of the other apartments.
Yeah.
So how come you have those two random units there? So what happened was that that building was originally meant to be the clubhouse, the function room. But
Mm-hmm.
while the developer was building the development, the developer went bust.
Okay.
So another developer came into the picture and said, look, here's the deal. So each of you homeowners, okay, you already paid, you need to pay me a bit more for me to take
Mm-hmm,
over and finish the project. Because
mm-hmm,
obviously I am not a bleeding heart. I'm not going to do this for free.
mm-hmm.
On top of that, the clubhouse you have over there, you need to let me convert it into another 2 units, which I can sell to add to my
Okay.
profit. So,
Mm-hmm,
okay,
mm-hmm,
I'm sure that the residents weren't pleased about losing a clubhouse. But
mm-hmm,
if
mm-hmm.
hypothetically I'm one of the residents and you give me a choice between having an unfinished development there forever or taking the hit and giving up the clubhouse and paying a bit more, I
Mm-hmm.
think the logical choice is clear. So obviously
Definitely.
this isn't going to apply, to every single
Yeah,
development. But my point is sit down and try to find some innovative solutions.
definitely.
It is for you to find such solutions based on your own individual situations.
Yeah, that's why for me, going back to Arid, our business, we decided to pivot the business. That's why now we
Mm.
have Luminaire.
Oh, yep,
Okay,
yep. Mm,
the way I see it is there will always be in every problem like this, there will always be an opportunity. You just have to find it. And
mm,
luckily, we really found Luminaire, and I think Luminaire will be a very good product. I mean, this is
good.
based on my experience. I never give up, right?
Mm, mm,
When we see that, okay, I mean, while people are fretting, what will we do? What will happen? We have to think and stuff. Others are really panicking and stuff. I'm thinking already of solutions. So this is where
mm.
the Luminaire comes in. So I
Yes.
think it's just a matter of mindset also. It's just a positive mindset. And try
Mm,
to find new niches. I think there will definitely be something that will pop out. There will be new businesses that will be profitable due to this situation. You just have to capitalize on it, you know.
No, and I think you make an excellent point, which is this. Um, I think for those of us who are just trying to survive this period, after which normal service resumes and we
Mm,
go back to our old businesses, we go back
mm.
to the old way we do things, I am concerned that that may not be the most forward-thinking
Correct.
approach.
Yes,
I mean,
definitely.
I'll give you another example, okay, from the legal perspective, okay, because you know
Mm-hmm.
law firms are businesses also, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think this and don't get me wrong, my views don't represent the views of my firm, all right.
Okay.
But I think this crisis has forced us to examine some of the sacred cows we have. Okay, for example, is there really a need for us to have so much office space in the
Mm-hmm.
CBD, which for a lot of law firms is a prerequisite? But now with the COVID-19, half of it is going to be unoccupied all the time anyway, right?
Yeah.
So do you really need so much office space, for example? That's one example. If you talk about working from home for lawyers, is it
Mm-hmm.
not the case that with technological tools, much of it can be done outside of the office? Do you really need to be physically in the office? And are
Correct.
these things that you can focus on to reduce your overheads so that you can continue to thrive as a business? And
Mm-hmm.
this is just the tip of the iceberg. But the point I'm
Yeah.
really making is we can't work on the assumption that
Mm-hmm.
we just need to survive this and then we go back to normal. We
No.
have to figure out, we have to acknowledge that this is the new normal, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can't even define the new normal because it
Mm-hmm.
is an ever-changing situation. But we have to find a way to survive and even thrive in this new
Adapt.
situation.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you have, yeah, adaption, because you know, for me, I'm in the office design industry, so most of my friends, connections, peers are in this line. So
Mm,
now everyone I talk to, I keep on telling them that the office will be, I mean, I'm not saying it's gonna die, but
mm,
it will be on life support for a certain period of time. So I think all of those, you know, in the interior in the commercial industry, office industry, should start thinking
yep.
of how to pivot their business. I mean,
Diversify.
diversify,
Mm,
adapt, and stuff like that. That is what I try to advise to them, because this is technically what I did. And
mm,
the way I see it, based on the feedback from the Luminaire, from all over the world, you know, people
mm,
from Japan, from Australia, from Switzerland, from Malaysia, from Vietnam, they're all asking us about this product. So it's exciting times. So
mm.
it's something I can say that, you know, it might be an opportunity. We call it a blessing in disguise. You see? So
Yeah,
we all have to
it's
find
only,
our own
yeah.
blessing in disguise, you see.
Well, it
So we
doesn't feel
cannot
like a
solve.
blessing now,
No,
but you know,
I mean, because like what I say, different people, you have to find opportunities. Eh? It's not that life has to go on. That's
agree,
the bottom line. Life has to go on. It's not gonna stop
agree.
because, you know, you're not doing anything. That's the bottom
Yes,
line, right?
correct.
Kelvin,
Correct.
we're running
Mm.
out of time.
Oh dear.
We're almost out.
Yeah, we
So
were having such
I
a
know
good time.
we really have a very good conversation. I really love this. It's free flowing. You know, we have notes, but you know, we're also able to cover all our notes of for discussion. So I think let's just give. I'll just give you one last what do you call this? One last topic or one last say over for this,
Yeah,
and
I
then
mean, yeah, I mean, I think we had some things prepared, on stuff in relation to foreign workers, but maybe we'll do another
yeah.
one. I don't want to
That's
keep
what I
everyone.
wanted to do also. I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think the way I see it, you know, our talk now is a very huge success. I can see that our viewership is quite high. I'm not really sure whether after this we will see how much people really viewed it live online, and then of course a lot more will watch in replay. So if this has a good feedback, maybe we can extend it, but it's okay. I
Mm,
think
mm,
maybe
mm, mm.
another 15 minutes won't hurt, you
Okay,
know.
sure, sure.
So
So I think,
I'll leave you the floor.
sure.
Okay.
Okay, so I remember when we were talking about what we wanted to discuss, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then in fact, this came up earlier in our conversation. We were
Yeah.
talking about how for a lot of the foreign workers, because of the new conditions that they
Mm-hmm.
are working
Mm-hmm.
under, whether, what if they talk about wanting more pay as a hazard or hardship allowance? Remember, we were talking about
Yes.
this
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
lead up. Okay, so So first of all, strictly speaking, okay, the employer cannot unilaterally change the employee's scope of work. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so in other words, the employer cannot say, okay, today you are doing A, now you do B, and you just have to suck it up and accept it, technically
Mm.
from a legal point of view. Okay,
Okay.
but I want to be very practical and realistic also, because let's face it, there is unequal bargaining power between the
Mm-hmm.
foreign worker and the employer.
Yeah.
If the employer tells you, okay, sorry, now you have to wear PPE, now I have to stop you from going out on your off days,
Mm-hmm.
now you have to wash your hands all the time, and the foreign worker complains and demands more pay, there's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to stop the employer from
Okay.
giving notice and sending the foreign worker home.
Okay.
But I recognize that, again, these are unusual times because it may well be that the foreign worker has more bargaining power now because
Mm-hmm.
of the manpower crunch that we were just
Mm-hmm.
discussing, right?
Yeah.
So, though strictly speaking, okay, the employee doesn't have the right to demand more pay. It may well be that for once the tables are slightly turned
Mm-hmm.
and the threat of them terminating their employment and going home is enough for the employer to try to accommodate in some way.
Okay.
But that being said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
that being said, um, again, one of the common themes we keep coming back to is the money doesn't appear out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of the construction companies or for the contractors, I think their attitude might well be that, look, everyone is suffering. If you don't get a pay cut, you are already in an amazingly lucky position, and we are really not in a position to be giving you pay increases.
Mm-hmm.
So I think let's be very practical and commercial here.
Yeah.
I don't think going to the strict letter of the law is going to be very helpful. I think ultimately it boils down to the bargaining positions of the
Mm.
parties and who needs who more. Let me put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like I said, these are really unusual times. If we were having this conversation, say 6 months ago, I would say, come on, the foreign worker has zero bargaining power. But as you shared, things might be a bit different now.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mm,
That's what I hear from outside. I also know a few foreign workers. So roughly I text them also. So how are they and stuff like that. So these are all what do you call this, sound bites coming from the ground.
mm,
Yeah.
mm. And look, I mean, I don't mean to sound unsympathetic, but I think the reality is, I think this COVID-19 situation has also
Mm.
forced us as a nation to really examine how we treat our foreign workers, who we
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge are an integral part of our country and our economy. So
Mm-hmm.
it may
Mm-hmm.
well be that the shifting of the power balance in terms of negotiations, that may not be necessarily a bad thing if it
Mm-hmm.
if it becomes an economic reason for us to treat our foreign workers better. But
Yes.
again, this is just one of the very many moving parts that are part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you see, okay, so let's take the other flip side of the question. So what if you have a foreign worker who says, boss cannot, I want to go home, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm sure that as an employer, you wouldn't be very happy or pleased about this as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll be a bit concerned. So the thing is, most employment contracts would provide for the situation in which you can terminate the contract. Sometimes, but most of the time, there will be a notice period. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
even if the foreign worker wants to go home, the foreign worker will need to serve notice or make payment in lieu of the notice. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it may well be that the specific contract has a clause that covers a pandemic situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where it says that you don't have to serve notice in a pandemic situation, but I doubt it because
Yeah.
I think most people, when they
No,
come out with
no.
contracts, you don't even think about
Yeah.
it, right?
All of these
Yeah,
things,
so
it's not. I mean, especially pandemics, right? They're not
yeah,
really there. I see a lot
who
of
would have
all
thought
of
of it?
this for merger contracts. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, I think realistically, let's be practical. If the employee wants to go home, there's really nothing that the employer can
Yes.
do to stop them. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's the reality. Okay. Okay. How about this? Okay, we go on to the last point which we wanted to
Yeah.
share, and this was the super interesting question you asked me. Why don't you share with our viewers what this interesting question was?
What is that?
Oh, about catching COVID-19 on site.
Yeah. I mean, is it the last one?
Yep,
Yeah, I
the
mean the
last one.
implication, but
Correct. That's the one.
like
Yeah.
yeah, what will be the implication if a client caught COVID-19 virus from a worker while on site, even though the contractor has complied to safety measures, but the foreign worker did not fully exercise the precaution on site. Like for example, in an office, right? You know,
Mhm.
there are a lot of people mingling together. You know,
Yep.
the people working in the office, and then especially if it's a live office, they will be the what do you call this? The worker will also be there. You know, so
Mm,
what if they got the COVID-19 from these workers? So what will
mm,
happen?
mm. Okay. So, okay, before we talk about what happens to the client who catches COVID-19, let's
Mm,
deal with the obvious elephant in the room. Is that
mm,
the moment you have a worker who is diagnosed with COVID-19, you
mm-hmm.
need to shut down that section of the work site, okay, for disinfection and cleaning.
Okay.
I can guarantee you that MOH will be around to do a contact tracing exercise, and I can
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you that all of the workers' colleagues, people that the worker was working closely with, they will also end up being quarantined. So you are going to have that disruption to business already, okay? Which,
Mm,
in a sense, is why all the measures that the government is talking about to really stop the spread of COVID-19 is to the workers, sorry, is to the employer's advantage also.
mm-hmm.
Because the moment you have a confirmed COVID-19 case at your work site, it just leads to so much disruption.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's say you have a client on site and the client catches COVID-19 from one of your
Mm,
workers. Okay.
correct.
So
Yeah, that's the
first
thing.
thing, okay. So first thing is, can the client prove that he or she caught COVID-19 from one of your workers on site? I mean, he or she could have caught it from anywhere, right? We don't know, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
I mean, even if you
No, I
talk
mean
about,
there might be an incident wherein okay, you know, this person that had COVID-19, and then eventually, after a few days, this it became a cluster.
yep, yep,
It become a cluster. So there's a possibility that the
mm,
carrier is the person that has COVID-19 a few days
yep,
before.
yep,
You see,
yep. Okay, so
cannot prove
what I'm
it,
going to
but
share. mm,
there's a high possibility. Yeah.
Okay, so let's assume for the purposes of this conversation, okay, that there is a cluster is linked to a particular worker and it's proven that the client is linked to this cluster and
Mm-hmm.
the client is not linked to any other cluster. Then I
Yeah.
suppose it may well be that more likely than not, the client caught it from this cluster, which is
Mm-hmm.
linked to the employee. Okay,
Okay.
and okay, so the problem is this: what if the employer has done everything that the employer can do? You know, is tried to educate the
Mm-hmm.
employees, is given the PPE to the employees. You've got a safety officer on site. Every
Mm-hmm.
time you see the employee not wearing a mask, you shout, "Oh, wear your mask." Okay,
Mm.
but then when people are not on site, they break the rules and then they spread COVID-19 as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, employers are not going to like this answer. Okay, but if the employee has been negligent and because
Mm.
of that, the client catches COVID-19
Mm.
and the client has suffered some kind of loss as a result, then there is a risk of the employer being sued, even though the employer has not been negligent.
Yes.
And the reason for this, unfortunately, is because of this concept known as vicarious liability, where
Mm-hmm.
if an employee is negligent, even if the employer is not negligent, the employer may still be liable for the acts of the employee.
Yeah. As a result,
So,
right? Yeah.
yeah, so this
Mm.
is not a good situation for employers. But I can offer one very practical solution for employers, which is to purchase public liability insurance. So this
Mm-hmm.
is the kind of insurance that covers the situation where you are sued by a third party. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's not a perfect solution because I know you need to pay your insurance premiums, and I'm not even sure, looking at the plans on the market, whether the exclusions include anything related to COVID-19. But that's
Yes.
something worth looking into. If you
Mm-hmm.
have work sites that have a lot of people coming and going, and you think
Mm-hmm.
that this is enough of a risk that you want to
Mm-hmm.
try and mitigate the risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Understood. Got it.
Yeah, so I think this is more or less what I wanted to share
Yeah.
with our viewers. Maybe I'll just share some final thoughts if you don't mind,
Yeah.
James.
No, sure, sure. Go, go, go. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't feel, the actual pain that an SME owner or small business owner is going through, right? Because
Yes.
the reality is that, even though I am in a way running a legal practice as well, I'm not seeing my dream company, my dream F&B outlet going up in smoke. And these are really tough and unprecedented times. And if you are such an SME owner, or you own an F&B outlet, or even if you are someone who has lost your job because of the
Mm-hmm.
crisis, I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through. I can only
Yes.
empathize. Okay, but all I hope is that this little discussion today with James would have
Mm-hmm.
given you some practical ideas for the future, and hopefully to help you in some small way to weather the crisis. Again, I'm under no illusion. I am not a miracle worker, but hopefully these are just some small things that you find helpful for yourself in these very
Yes.
difficult times.
Yeah.
So, but most of all, I'm also very thankful to James for helping to create all these communities that we can all use to come together to help each other in these difficult times. I mean, it's a cliche, but together we are stronger.
Yeah.
So my parting shot is for the viewers, and even someone who's not watching this live, but who's watching this afterwards.
Yes. There will
Feel
be a
free
lot
to
of
get.
people, yeah, who will be watching it on replay. Yeah.
So I mean, what I wanted to share was really feel free to get in touch with me if you need help.
Mm-hmm.
I'll always be happy to hear you out. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not difficult to find me. Just Google my name and really just hang in there, and we will get through this together.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Calvin, for sharing your thoughts. I mean, it's very valuable because, we got a lot of viewers. I can see we got a lot of viewers. There's one point we almost got about 80, 90 over viewers all at the same time, which is usually on my shows, it's about 70, 60 now. I think this one will be our top rated show because of you. And it's because, like what I say, this is a very relevant topic, and I'm glad that I was able to invite you to share your thoughts, especially
It
on the
was my
legal
pleasure,
point of
really.
view. And hopefully, maybe next season, if we will come up with another
Sure.
season for Todd Talk Online. Hopefully no more, because another season will be the second wave.
Yeah.
And I don't
Be
really
careful
like
what you
this to
wish for.
happen. No, 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 no,
Yeah.
no. I don't want it.
Yeah.
That's why it's only season one, 10
Mm,
episodes. We're at episode 5 already. The next episode will be about workplace health with the
mm,
ergotron.
mm.
Okay, so again, I wanted to thank all the viewers who tuned in, and thank you very much, Kelvin. We are still scheduled to do a few vlogs, and
Mm.
probably one more seminar once everything is like a conference, networking conference. Once everything is
Yes.
already settled, we can
Mm.
already converge in one place.
Yes.
So I'm looking forward to that. And for now, we have to do away with online Zoom, Facebook Live. So I think this one will be one of our most successful runs, and it's halfway through. So we really expect a very good feedback for this episode.
Well, I
And
think
thank you very much.
if I may jump in, I think what would measure its success is not so much how many people tune in,
Yeah,
but whether really this has been of a help to people. And
definitely.
that really is my sincere hope.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah.
But thank you so
I
much, James. I really appreciate it.
I think it's not, yeah, you're right. It's not really about the number of people. It's about maybe two or three that we are able to help.
Yes, agree
That
completely.
that is a very good gauge already. And then, I mean, through this platform, through this talk, they were able to learn and probably have some idea on what they will do, right? Although we didn't really go into the details, is because if we go into the details, we will take hours, right? We are trying to condense everything into an hour. Now we're almost an hour and a half already, but it's okay. it's a very enriching and a very engaging conversation with you. Okay,
It's
so
entirely my
finally,
pleasure.
yeah, let me thank our affiliate members in the officedesigner.com, Foyer, Digify, X2 Asia, Office and Others, ISP Acoustics, IA Racking Solutions, Arid Builders, Luminaire, and Ergotron. So, good night, everyone. And hopefully, you will have a good weekend. And we're just a week to the lifting of our circuit breaker. So, we will have one more episode before the circuit breaker next Friday. And hope to see you there. Okay? Good night, Kelvin.
Good night. Thank you for having me. Take care, everyone. Bye bye now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Bye. Good night.